or moderator code. Please say your name, followed by the pound key.
Regular meeting of Clear Lake City Council of Monday, March 1st, 2021 shall come to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Motion to approve the agenda, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dana, seconded by Mark, that we approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. To the consent agenda, you have a copy of the minutes of February 15, 2021. We need approval of the bills and claims, of which you also have a copy. We have the following licenses and permits. Liquor license, Class C beer permit, Class B wine permit with Sunday sales at Dollar General, Class B beer permit with outdoor service and Sunday sales at Lake Time Brewery, Class C liquor license with Sunday sales, that's Rookies and Sevens by Rookies, Class C liquor license with Sunday sales, Tapped, Special Class C liquor license with Sunday sales, Shouting Goo, those are renewals. Excavator license, Charleston Excavating, that's a renewal. And sign erector license, LRI Graphics and Signs, that is new. Motion, please.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Dana, seconded by Mike, that we approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Now is the time and place for anyone in the audience who wishes to address the council on any issue or concern that is not on the agenda. Please approach the podium, state your name first and last, and give your address so that the clerk can properly enter it in the minutes. This is not a discussion time nor a question and answer time, and you have 3 to 5 minutes. None appearing, we'll move on to number 5, unfinished business. 5A, rezoning request 408 Mars Hill Drive, which is the former Sunset School property. And we have on the final reading to take action on ordinance number 857. And this is an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city of Clear Lake, Iowa to rezone certain property to RS8. That's medium density, single family residential by this city council. Entertain a motion, please.
So offered.
Second.
Moved by Mike, seconded by Gary, that we approve ordinance number 857 on the third and final reading. Is there any discussion? Roll call. Mark?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Bennett?
Yes.
And Gary?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0, and ordinance number 857 is now duly adopted. 5B, ordinance amending elected officials' compensation, which will be effective on January 1st of 2022. And this is on the second reading. And this is a motion to increase the mayor's pay from $600 to $700 a month, and the council from a total of $300 a month, which is from a total of $2,500 to $3,600. And it states, an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances of the City of Clear Lake, Iowa, 2003 by amending the mayor and council compensation. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Gary, seconded by Dana, that we approve ordinance number 858 on the second of 3 readings. Is there any discussion? Roll call. Mike?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Bennett?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
And where am
Yes.
And Mark. Motion carries 5-0, and that's approved on the second reading. 6A, new business. Fiscal year 21 amended and fiscal year 22 proposed municipal budget, review of draft fiscal year 21 amended and fiscal year 22 proposed municipal budget by Scott Flory, City Administrator. Welcome, Scott.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Council, we'll run through the budget again tonight. We went through it fairly comprehensively at the last council meeting, but this is the meeting at which we adopt a tentative preliminary budget and then set the date for a public hearing on the proposed, in this case, fiscal year 21 and 22 budget, fiscal year 21 amended, fiscal year 22 proposed budget. So run through the PowerPoint presentation here. Just point out a few things here preliminarily. This year's, for fiscal year 22, our budget's a little less fiscally aggressive than the amended fiscal year 21 budget. So we're looking at a almost $15 million budget for fiscal year 22 versus $18.6 million budget for fiscal year 21 amended. So as always, the preparation of the budget documents guided by three primary financial goals. The first is that we continue to respond to state-imposed property tax reform. So everyone obviously very familiar with the rollback on properties. So in the case of commercial and industrial, we deal with a 90% rollback. Now we're dealing with a rollback on multifamily projects, and of course the forever present rollback on single-family residential properties. So that is first and foremost being responsive to the property tax reforms imposed at the state level, so that we can ensure that we're preparing a budget that responds as best as possible to those issues from the state. Second, the budget establishes and supports financial conditions that enhance the community's financial position in terms of fund balances, debt issuance practices. These things have a real impact for us in the community and here for our organization. And you've seen these things in recent times here with our debt placements here locally for three long-term debt placements that we had that were three issues purchased here by locally operated banks that you could see. Really, I think, again, we have a very strong relationship with our local banks, but that's part of the equation, but also the fact that Clear Lake is in such a strong position financially. Those things are tangible and they're real. They translate to significant ability to borrow money at the rates that we were able to borrow them for. So we have, as you know, very, very little debt. I would submit one of the lowest levels of debt in not only the state, Midwest, but in the country. And when you see issuances coming back for taxable issues at 0.5% on over $1 million in debt, that's, as I told you before, our bond counsel in Des Moines has been, he's 80, and he's been doing this his entire life, and he said in 60 years of this kind of work, he has not seen rates that we were able to obtain. And so, at some point, that's more than just luck. Also, we try to maintain affordable fee structures, affordable tax structures for our residents and businesses, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, in particular with the property tax rate. Once again, keeping the tax rate as it is for fiscal year 21, keeping that the same for fiscal year 22 at $9.70 per thousand in taxable valuation. So again, those are kind of the three overarching themes and strategies that we use to guide the budgeting process here. So. Again, the proposed tax rate for Clear Lake for fiscal year 22. Of course, we're talking about the budget year that starts July 1st of this year and would end on June 30th of 2022. Is proposed to remain the same as it is for current fiscal year budget, so 21. So that's again $9.70 per thousand of taxable valuation. So this is the sixth consecutive fiscal year that the city's share of the consolidated tax rate has either remained the same or constant without an increase. And if we go back to fiscal year 17, the city tax rate had decreased from $10.54 to $10.04. Then we decreased that again in fiscal year 18. We lowered the rate from $10.04 to $9.80. For fiscal year 19, we then lowered the rate from $9.80 to $9.70, and that's where we have remained for the last 4 fiscal years. So. In terms of the taxable valuations for fiscal year 22, we have the January 1 of 20 valuations that we rely on for that. So Once again, we see, we'll talk about this in the slides in a moment, but the positive trend of growth in the community. So the taxable valuation for fiscal year '22 is $728,071,665, which is about a $33.3 million increase, or about 4.5% increase over what fiscal year '21 is. The significance there to point out is, of course, that happens despite the commercial rollback, the industrial rollback from 100% to 90%, and as I said before, now the multifamily property rollback. So that is significant for us for sure. Residential rollback for fiscal year '22 is set at 56.41%, so that is actually a slight increase from the fiscal year '21 rate. Currently, that rate is at 55.07. So again, that means for the budget for fiscal year '22, we'll be able to tax residential property at a little bit higher rate in fiscal year '22 than we did in fiscal year '21. And of course, that's the rate that's set by the state legislature. If we look at the slide we have up, you see the proposed fiscal year '22 budget reflects total expenditures among the various programs of just right around $14.9 million. And you can see how that breaks down. We have $9.7 million towards operations and maintenance, $4.5 million towards capital, and roughly $700,000 for debt services. The pie chart that just kind of shows the expenditure breakdown into the various categories that we have there, so not much there. The next one, the FY22 major capital projects, again, just identifying some of these, of course, start in the current fiscal year that we're in now, which is fiscal year '21. So when we talk about the Woodford site demo and improvements, of course, that would begin this fiscal year, carry over into fiscal year '22. We also have anticipated an alley improvement project, may or may not happen, but we have that budgeted. Also, again, the demo and improvements at the county shed, which is, of course, the South 15th Street project. Obviously, that will begin this fiscal year and carry over into fiscal year '22. If we get a grant, we're going to be doing some stormwater quality improvements at the Wellness Center, in the parking lot, South Lakeview Drive, again, some initial stages there on construction engineering, plans and specification work. 6th Avenue South is a street project, crack and seed. South 11th Street's a water improvement project. Continue to budget annually for sidewalk improvements. We have an overlay project that we're anticipating for fiscal year '22. And the Highway 18 project, the economic development project, of course, the commercial project. Courtway Park Lot 3 project, another economic development commercial project. And 12th Avenue South and South 8th Street is a storm sewer improvement project. In terms of the capital purchases, this is the year we rotate out on the patrol cars, so this is the year we buy 2 patrol cars. Then under, again, Park and Rec for and pool, you'll see the improvements to the county shed property. Wellness Center, purchasing of equipment and furniture for the Wellness Center building. Public Works, purchase a skid loader and trailer and utility truck and pickup truck. And again, continue to put money aside in the reserve funds for ambulance and fire and road use. In terms of the total revenues, you can see again, property taxes are the lion's share of the revenue for the city at about 40% of our revenues. Other taxes and TIF represent 31%, so we're talking about local option sales tax, hotel motel tax, those kinds of things there. Next page, the general fund. So this is obviously, general fund's a major operating fund for the city. Projected revenues there, a little over $8 million. Anticipated expenditures, again, $8 million, so we have a balanced budget there. Projecting ending cash balance in the general fund is just under $5 million. I think I mentioned last time to give you a kind of a comparison on that. There's a neighboring community that's about 3 times their population that is the same size general fund reserve that they have. So that is certainly a strong financial position to be in terms of a cash balance in the general fund. That represents 62% of the general fund budget. So very strong position to be in. Very few cities, if any, would be anywhere near that level of fiscal position. Projected reserve fund balances, we also have the Public Safety Equipment Reserve Fund at $290,000, and then the South Lakeview Drive Project Reserve Fund, we have $500,000 in that. The pie chart for the general fund revenues, again, property taxes represent the lion's share of the revenues for the general fund at 60%, and then we have other taxes, again, hotel, motel, and local option are the biggest source there at 24%. So. The next sheet for the property tax rate, so this for the current fiscal year that we're in right now. As I mentioned, the tax rate is proposed at $9.70 per thousand of taxable valuation. So for fiscal year 21, we had the 5th lowest tax rate. As I mentioned before, we always kind of had that 4 position before, so we dropped one. I'm not sure what happened there, but the lowest tax rates, you can see there, Eldridge, 6.73, Evansdale, a little less than 8, Dyersville, Asbury, those are kind of suburban communities of the Waterloo area, or excuse me, the Dubuque area, Clear Lake, Ankeny, Dubuque, pretty good company there. Highest rates, again, that's a little bit more dubious list, maybe one you don't want to be on there, but that's, you can see Ottumwa at $22.50, Waterloo at $18.50. So again, at $9.70 per thousand of taxable valuation, that is a strong position to be in terms of competing for economic development projects. This is the slide I was put this up, the industrial property tax comparison. So obviously that represents Clear Lake's single largest valued property, which of course is none other than the McKesson property. For fiscal year 21, that had a taxable valuation of $23.3 million. And so assessed valuation of $23.3 million. So to get the taxable valuation, we calculate that times 90%. So we arrive at a taxable valuation of just under $21 million there. So if we were to juxtapose the tax rate of Clear Lake and Mason City and Saragordo County, you can see the difference of the fiscal year 21 rate for Clear Lake at $970 versus Mason City at $1439. The difference being for fiscal year 21, that property for Clear Lake, which you can see in the blue, would be $203,540 in taxes. In Mason City, it would be almost $302,000. So that's a very significant difference. The next one, industrial tax comparison. Again, this is for the entire consolidated tax rate for Saragordo County. So this is including all of the taxing entities in the county and what impact that has. So in Clear Lake, again, you can see the consolidated tax rate for Clear Lake, Saragordo County, is less than $30 per thousand. And that same rate, when you factor in all the other taxing entities, including school, community college, and so forth, you're at 36.17. So the difference under that would be $759,000 versus $629,000. So as I say every year, when these companies look at the long-term costs of doing business and make selections in one community versus another, you better believe that they recognize property taxes as a business cost, a cost of doing business, and it's something they take into consideration when they develop their pro formas and determining where they're going to go, because typically every community will offer some incentives, and once those run out, then they have to factor that in. Total tax bill components, again, it's just kind of mentioning, this, once in a while, years back, we used to hear, or I did anyways, from people, what's the city do with all that property tax money I give them? And, they lost sight, I think, that there are other taxing entities in Saragordo County besides the city. So we, as a city of Clear Lake, we represent 34% of that tax bill pie. And so you've got Clear Lake School District and Saragordo County in there at 37, 23% respectively. So in Clear Lake, we're about a third of what that property tax bill is. Consolidated tax rate, again, for this current fiscal year 21, there are 95 cities in Iowa with a population of 4,000 or more. And for the consolidated tax rate, we had the 7th lowest in the state for cities of 4,000 or more in population. So again, a very strong position to be in. You can see where some of the others are at. But again, we're right in there with several communities that I compare us to, including Carroll, Lamar's are very, very much peer communities of ours. So we're in good shape there. Again, you can see where we're at less than $30, and juxtapose that, let's say, to Des Moines at almost 50. That's a big difference. Property tax valuations, as I mentioned earlier, for fiscal year 22, the total taxable valuation, we're up about 4.5%, so about $33.3 million. Part of that is due to the rollback increasing from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22. So we went again from 55.07% to 56.41, and of course we're a primarily single-family residential kind of community, so that certainly had a positive impact on our valuation growth. But the part here I like with this slide is for fiscal year 22, the assessed valuation, you can see there, that's the 100% pre-rollback figure. So for Clear Lake, we're sitting at almost $1.2 billion in actual valuation in the community. So that is a really good, really strong number, represents a lot of growth in the community, and not just revaluing property, that's just a lot of growth. So that figure becomes very important in terms of calculating out our constitutional debt limit. And if we have that in the next slide or not, but so the Iowa Constitution limits our ability to borrow to 5% of that figure, so that nearly $1.2 billion figure. So that $58.4 million figure, we've issued, or we could issue up to $58.4 million at 5% of that figure. So we have currently on the books about 2.8. So we're using about 4.5% of our borrowing capacity. So again, we could issue debt up to almost $58.4 million based on that 100% valuation. So as I said before, many communities are in that 60 to 70% indebtedness category. That would be considered good. That's a good spot to be in, 60 to 70%. We're at less than 5. That's, Dana's always asked about being at no debt. That is totally no debt. That is, if you are less than 5%, you're running an $18 million, or you are at no debt whatsoever. That is as low as you can possibly get. And I've got many colleagues and friends say you need to be a lot more aggressive and take advantage, in particular where we're at today, in issuing some debt. Taxable valuation by class. You see here for fiscal year 22 for Clear Lake, we're almost, of our valuations, almost 70% of our property is valued as taxed as residential property here. So not a lot of multifamily, 2.4%. Commercial, less than 23% of our valuation is taxed as commercial, and not a lot of industrial, less than 2%. So we'll kind of start wrapping up here. The proposed tax rate, again, at $9.70 per thousand. So if we calculate that, as we always do, based on a situation for a property with an assessed valuation of $150,000, the fiscal year 21 tax bill for residential would be an increase of $19.43. There would be no change in commercial and no change in industrial due to the rollback. So again, 19.43 for a situation with $150,000 property valuation. Debt service levy, I'll try to go through some of these quicker. The debt service levy, so 31 cents per thousand of taxable valuation. This is what we use to pay the principal and interest on our outstanding debt issues. So we have a decrease of about 4 cents per thousand from fiscal year 21's rate. Next slide, so we can see again, 10 years ago, we had the issue for the fire station bond. That was a $2.3 million issue. That last payment is this June. So believe it or not, that's paid off. So that's off our books. We've added a few things like the wellness center, debt, as well as the land acquisition bonds for South 15th Street and North 4th Street. Next slide. Debt capacity, again, that's what I mentioned earlier, so I won't cover that again, but you can again see the most important thing there is using less than 5% of our capacity and less than 2.8 on the books. You know, I just know I'm a broken record and overbearing with it, but can't possibly put into terms how low that is. That, yeah, if anything, we'd be criticized for not having enough debt. Road use tax, that of course is collected by the state through motor vehicle registration fees, fuel taxes, excise tax imposed on rental of automobiles, and tax on trailers. So that, they increased that rate back in March of 2015. Again, that's allocated, of course, to cities on a per capita basis. So for fiscal year 22, we're anticipating about $1 million in revenues in the road use tax fund. So it's about $128 per capita. Other taxes, I mentioned, of course, we impose the local option sales tax. We have a 5% state tax, 1% school tax, and 1% city tax. So that gets your 7% here. 90% of that goes to property tax relief, 10% to community betterment. And for fiscal year 22, we're projecting about $1.5 million there from the Department of Revenue and local option sales tax. Hotel motel tax, that is at the rate of 7%. That was increased back in January of 2008. That was following a referendum to increase that. It was at 5%, and we proposed to increase that to 7%, which is the maximum rate allowable under state law. So for fiscal year 22, the estimated revenue there is $462,000. And you can see how that's split. The Convention and Visitor Bureau, aka Chamber of Commerce, receives 60% of that original 5%, so about $200,000 there. North Iowa Corridor receives 20% of that original 5%, which is about $60,000. And the city, since we do not impose the 1% sales tax on top of the hotel motel tax, we just make ourselves whole there by keeping that 1%, so again, $60,000. And then of the additional 2% that was added back in January 2008, that had to be stated for a specific purpose. And so for that ballot language, we included lake restoration improvements for the bulk of that, 75%, so about $100,000 there. And then also 25% of that additional 2%, about $31,000 for recreation cultural facilities. That's probably all I've got. Let me kind of review the remaining schedule here a little bit. Creighton is going to, tonight is the public hearing on the maximum property tax resolution, so Creighton's going to cover that portion with you, so I won't go over that. But the remaining schedule for budget consideration, again this evening we'll review the preliminary budget, adopt the preliminary budget, and set the date for a public hearing. So we will hold the public hearing on the budget on March 15th. Notice of the public hearing then has to be published. It's a not less than no more than 20-day notice. So that has to be published in the newspaper. We plan on doing that on March 3rd, so this Wednesday. That notice will be published in the paper for the fiscal year 21 amended and fiscal year 22 proposed budget. Then on March 15th, we'll hold the public hearing, repeat this process again, and then by March 25th, Creighton will certify the budget to the county auditor. So I don't have anything further in terms of the budget presentation. Just thank everyone for all of their assistance with it. You know, it's certainly a group effort that brings this document together. And I just say no one person more than other contributes to it, so I appreciate everyone's time involved in it, numerous meetings. Many thanks to Creighton for the benefit of his excellent support in putting the document together. It's his first budget, and I thought he did an outstanding job on it, and so I appreciate all of his help in putting it together.
Yeah, we thank you, Scott. As always, we were always very enlightened by this presentation. But nevertheless, we have all had a part of it all along the way, and well done, and Creighton as well. So, welcome, Creighton.
Mayor and council, Last year, the Iowa legislature passed Senate File 634, and this new piece of legislation requires cities to approve by resolution the maximum amount of property tax dollars prior to approving our final budget. If those dollars exceed 102% of the prior year, then the vote to approve the resolution needs to be at or above 2/3. Based on the calculation form from the state budget documents, the total dollars collected for fiscal year 22 is $5,712,264. And that amounts to a 4.58% increase in fiscal year 22 property tax dollars over fiscal year 21 property tax dollars. So the increase there, again, is solely based on our property valuations going up. As Scott mentioned a few times during the budget presentation, our levy amount is staying the same at 9.7, so that total increase in dollars there is all driven by the increase in property valuation. Also, just to note, and this is all on the purple sheet tonight, but on the back side, if you're looking at those calculations, the reason there's a difference between the 9.7 and the tax rate there of 9.38 is we don't report the debt service in this actual document. So when we're comparing to last year, we're not adding in the debt service. So when you add in that debt service levy, that's what gets you to the total 9.7. But total increase in dollars, again, of 4.58% for fiscal year 22.
And as Scott said, this is of your total tax bill, 1/3. And the other 2/3 is made up of school and the county and state and NIAC, and that's it. So, any questions for Creighton Council? Thank you. Now is the time and place for the public hearing with regard to fiscal year 21 amended and fiscal year 22 proposed municipal budget. If there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address the council on that particular issue, please approach the podium, state your name first and last, and give your address so the clerk can properly enter it in the minutes. None appearing, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Bennett, seconded by Mark, that we close the public hearing on fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22 proposed municipal budget. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. And now I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2114. This is a resolution approving maximum property tax levy resolution for the fiscal year July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022 for the city of Clear Lake, Iowa. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dana, seconded by Mark, that we approve Resolution 2114. Is there any discussion? Dana?
Yes.
Bennett?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
Mark? And Mike?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0. Resolution 2114 is duly adopted. And now I'll entertain a motion to adopt a preliminary budget and set March 15, 2021 at 6 p.m. as the date and time for a public hearing thereon by this city council. Motion, please.
So offered. Second.
Moved by Mike, seconded by Bennett, that we approve the adoption of preliminary budget on March 15th. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Thank you. 6B, police vehicle transfer agreement with the city of Clive. Review, Chief Roth. Welcome, Chief.
Council, I'm not used to being up here this early, so forgive me for not being ready all the time, or for this. But The PD is requesting approval for a transfer of a squad car with the city of Clive. Just to give you a little bit of background on it, about several months ago, maybe close to 6 months, we were contacted by the PD down there. They were trying to start a canine program similar to what Clear Lake did a long time ago. Their unit had to be started up with private funds, and the city would support it after the funds were raised. They met a goal. In talking with our officers up here, we told them that we actually had a canine unit that actually was just retired, one of our old squad cars, a 2016 Ford Explorer, that still had the canine equipment installed in the vehicle. After talking with them about it, they had a 2014 Police Explorer that their chief actually drove, had 52,000 miles on it, and they were requested that we could actually just transfer those vehicles with some of our radio equipment, video camera equipment out, and of course their equipment for their city. The city of Clive actually went through their formal resolution several council meetings ago, I want to say last month, and they approved the transfer, and now we're asking for the city of Clear Lake to approve the transfer on our end. We believe that the transfer is mutually beneficial to both departments. We have we'll have a white SUV Explorer that doesn't look like a squad car. It actually is made for human beings to be transported in it on all positions, as opposed to just the two in the front seat because of the partition and the canine area in the back. So really, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you again. We feel like we're going to get a good part of that bargain with this SUV. I know it's a couple years older, but our vehicle had a lot of idling miles on it because the canine was in it. So the mileage is not that important, but the idling time was. So with this less mileage here, this SUV that we're going to be able to get will help our operations immensely. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Council, any questions for Chief?
Yes, Pete, what's the goal for this car, since it's different than the others?
It is going to, right now it's going to be unassigned, so we can use it for investigations. We also use it for, as our school car. We send it down to the lab. We will be sending it down to the lab when we take our lab runs down there, so one of our dispatchers could actually drive it down there as opposed to having a full-size police car down there. So it will have many functions, and again, hopefully it will last us for several years too. So it will actually fill that void that we had, that we did not have I hate to say unassigned car, but it does give us a lot more opportunities that we did not have with that black SUV that we maintained.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief, appreciate that. Therefore, I entertain a motion to approve resolution, 2115, a resolution authorizing transfer asset agreement with the city of Clive for police vehicles. Motion, please.
Second.
Moved by Mark, seconded by Gary, that we approve resolution 2015. Is there any discussion? Bennett,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes?
Mike,
Yes.
and Mark.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0, and resolution 2115 is duly adopted. 6C, 2010 4th Street, former Woodford Wheeler property, property asbestos inspection and removal. Intro, Mr. Flory.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Didn't know Mr. Ritter was going to be here tonight, so I was going to give an introduction. I'll still do that anyway, and he can fill you in on the findings and conclusions from the asbestos inspection report conducted by Burgo Environmental of Mason City. So a couple of weeks ago, we reached out to Burgo and invited them to do a proposal for us for asbestos survey work at the old Woodford lumber property there at 210 North 4th Street. So we got that, gave them the okay to go ahead for that, and you got that copy of that in your packet. That was about $1,500 to do the survey work. Found some asbestos. I'll let Mike kind of talk more about that. So they gave us a proposal to go ahead and abate the asbestos. And so prior, of course, to any demolition activities taking place, there's a pretty extensive process that you got to go through. It involves getting some permits from the state and so forth to go through that. So we'll start that process. I think most of the asbestos is found in the floor tile and a little in some of those ceiling tiles, but otherwise none in the roof. And I was pleasantly surprised at how little asbestos there was in that building, so. Anything further in terms of any background on that, and Mike can kind of cover the report a little more in detail unless anybody has any questions about that.
Questions for Scott? Mr. Ritter? Thanks, Scott. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. As Scott had stated, we had the analysis on the building taken care of in that too. The majority of it was floor tile and adhesive in the original part of the original office. There was nothing in the basements, no piping, no nothing. None of that was in that basement at all, and then some ceiling texture in one of the back offices, so very minimal that was in there. Back the large building behind, there was nothing in there at all. Usually there's caulking adhesive or something. That's where you're gonna get most of your asbestos chemicals, that part, in those materials, that part, so it was very minimal that they had in the building, so we could have been a lot worse off. So a lot had been taken out or dealt with. There's nothing in the basement or anything, so.
Council, any questions for Mike? Didn't realize there was a basement in that. No questions? Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Therefore, I entertain a motion to approve the proposal with Burgo Environmental, Mason City.
So moved. Second.
By Bennett, seconded by Mike, that we approve the property asbestos inspection and removal by Burgo Environmental of Mason City. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Make sure you cheer those girls on, Mike, tonight. D, South 15th Street Inclusive Playground and Park Project, interim, Mr. Flory.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. You've got a copy in your packet of a professional services proposal from Bergeron and Cram for the playground improvement project at the South 15th Street project. Of course, the city's acquiring that from Saragordo County, former secondary road department. Of course, I guess I can't say former. They're still using it for couple more months yet, I suppose. It's 109, 110 South 15th Street is the actual address there. Of course, we're looking to develop a park there adjacent to the aquatic center that would primarily include the inclusive playground project, well as some splash pads, some supporting park amenities and so forth. So this is an item that, of course, we budgeted for in both fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. So this would be to utilize services of Bergeron and Cram to get that process underway. I'll let Christy King with Bergeron and Cram kind of review the proposal a little more thoroughly with you, but essentially you can see the cost for the conceptual design is $9,750, and then the construction document specification, site observation, so forth, a fee ranging between 7.5% and 9.5%. Would note that the portion that's for conceptual design and budgeting, that phase is credited towards the overall fee when the project moves forward. So it's not like an add-on to that. So that's all part of that 7.5% to 9.5% that we would negotiate out further with them after we do that initial work to determine the exact scope and scale of the proposed improvements. Then again, we would finalize out that contract with them that would have that more detailed percentage cost for their professional services. So I guess I don't have any. We've talked about it quite a bit. I mean, it's a very exciting project, so happy we're able to do something like this. I thank the county for working with us to be able to bring a project like this to our community. It's going to be a great amenity, I think, for not only the city of Clear Lake, but for Saragordo County. There's not another one of these parks in a pretty sizable radius, so I think it's a great opportunity for us. And I think Bergeron and Cram will do a really good job for us on it.
Council, any questions for Scott? Thank you, Scott. Christy King, Bergeron and Cram. Welcome, Christy.
We thank you for this opportunity to provide this proposal. I think Scott covered it pretty well, actually. Maybe just to highlight that, breaking out that whole process kind of into an initial phase just allows everyone to kind of come to terms with what the scope is that we're really all talking about. And then we just we set forth with the full design and documents. That does also include coordination on our part of all necessary engineering, equipment suppliers for the play equipment and the splash pad. Any questions for me?
So, excuse me, so you will be in direct contact with the engineering firm that's going to provide that equipment?
Correct, yep. So we kind of act as the point of organization for the whole holistic team. We'll organize that, you know, if there's civil engineers and the suppliers for like the playground equipment or the splash pad equipment, that will all funnel through us so that it's an organized linear process.
So then you will determine where it will be positioned?
Correct.
within the-
We'll work together with the
I see.
designers and engineers to come up with a plan. Kind of that first phase will allow you to see a site plan, kind of a layout, a 3D rendering so that everyone can envision what that is, and then a high-level kind of budget range. Everything will kind of be placed, and then once that is decided that that's the scope that is agreeable to everyone, then we'll go forth with the detailed design and documents needed to construct it.
Which will include a parking area along with?
Yes, anything, any of the other amenities in addition to the playground or the splash pad, the holistic amenities that the park needs, will coordinate all of that. Correct.
Any other questions for Christie Council?
All right, thank you.
Therefore, entertain excuse me, a motion to approve the professional services agreement with Bergeron and Cram with regard to the South 15th Street Inclusive Playground and Park Project. Motion, please.
So offered.
Second.
Moved by Mike, seconded by Dana, that we approve the Bergeron and Cram professional services agreement proposal. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 6E, 2010 North 4th Street Library Building Expansion Project. Interim Mr. Flory.
Thanks again, Mayor. Again, another partnership agreement, also with Bergeron and Cram. This is for what we kind of generally referred to as an expansion over towards the library project, the 210 North 4th Street property that we're in the process of acquiring from the Lovell family, the former Woodford Wheeler lumberyard property. So this is something, again, we've been talking about for quite a bit of time, the acquisition of that. Again, our intention would be to acquire that for a future place for perhaps library expansion, community center, these kinds of things that would feature a lot of what we think are innovative, creative ways to take our library into the next needs for the next generation. You know, we talked about this before, and I had mentioned it, I think, our budget workshop, we kind of talked about this, and I said, you know, I don't know what a 21st century library should look like. The last edition that we did on our library was done in about 1999, and so it's got more than 20 years on it, but I do know that just at a personal level, what the technology and things that I had back in 1999 do not look like they look today in 2021. And so I know in terms of buying a sewer jetback, the sewer jetbacks that were around in 1999 are not anywhere near what they look like in 2021. So while I can't pretend to know what a 21st century library looks like, I think we all want to have part in a conversation to talk about that. And I know the library, you know, we talked with them, very excited about that opportunity to capitalize, I think, on this I think a really cooperative arrangement with the Lovell family to purchase this property. I think it was a great great gesture on their part to reach out to us to ask if we had any interest in that. I think they could have probably sold that property for more than what we're paying for it and paid for it to a private developer to do something else there. But I think they saw a broader community need, in particular the opportunity for us to expand that and to be, again, a more 21st century kind of facility. So I think it's a neat opportunity for us. So again, with Bergeron and Cram, I think one of the things I've kind of watched Christy and Andy over the years, and I'm really impressed with, in particular, Christy, and the way I've watched her do the first part of this package is the visioning process. And I'm not sure really when you talk about, there's always important parts of a project, designing it and these kinds of things, engagement. And I'm not sure what's more important than that, really. If you don't know what you're doing from the get-go, you're off to a bad start. So I can't think of where money would be better invested than at the very beginning of the project, and where it's more critical to get it right is at that very beginning. So I think they bring an excellent background and great reputation in doing these kinds of projects, but also, again, in the community engagement, getting people involved, living in our community, knowing the people in our community, using our library, using our facilities. So I think that sets them apart from most firms in this case. I think also the fact that when we get into these projects, I always remember back in one large project we had where we had kind of a discrepancy between the design professional and the contractor, and I was glad that we had gone the path we did, because I thought in that case the architect was very independent and not beholding to anyone other than the relationship they had with the owner, which of course was us. So I thought that helped us get through some more challenging aspects on that. And so I think the independence that they bring as an independent architectural firm is important in a project like this, for sure. So again, the visioning concept part, I think that's kind of spelled out here. We'll talk a little bit about that. To establish the vision, I think is critically important for a project as we go forward here. Forecasting the need. What is the need? We always talk about that. Nelson and I talk about that very frequently on all of these projects. What is the need? Well, if you don't have a visioning process, I don't know how you find out what the need is. So that's a very important part of it. Rationalizing the space and the services that we would provide in it. Is it the right fit for us? So is it necessary? So I think that's a really important part of the process. And this is going to be one that I think is going to involve a wide variety of groups. I think there'll be a lot of stakeholders involved, special interests, and so forth. So much like with the Wellness Center, I would anticipate the same kind of a process here, where we become very involved with the community in determining what our next steps are for this process. So again, very, very important to get that community engagement. I think they do a terrific job of those kinds of things. So in terms of the timeline for it, I think, again, we would, obviously, we have the building. We don't own it yet, so we still have ways to go here. So we anticipate maybe closing about the middle of this month, and sometime probably this month, getting Burgo involved to do the environmental. In terms of the scope of this contract, I think we would then start getting Burgo and Cram involved to do, as it spells out in here, to kind of document some of the existing conditions. When we met with the levels, that was kind of important to them, that we would document some of the existing conditions there, and that if there were assets that could be transferred over for a future building project, that maybe we would take those into consideration. Also that I think maybe there could be some design ideas that maybe we want to continue on. Obviously, the Woodford legacy is well known here in the community. I believe it was, Bennett, you'll probably correct me on this, was 1869?
That sounds right.
1869, so one of the longest standing, continuously operated businesses in the state of Iowa. So, if there's a way to pay tribute to that legacy, I think we'd like to be able to do that. We've got a variety of groups that we need to involve in that process, including the Library Foundation, the Friends of the Library, the Library Board, City Council, many community stakeholders through that process. So, we would probably start that sometime maybe April.
timeframe and kind of work from there. I think as they spell out here, we're probably looking at about a 5-month kind of process in that timeframe for a visioning, conceptual design, schematic kind of design work. So I think that's very, very appropriate. One opportunity, again, anything that would happen there to support a library, so that would be considered a general corporate purpose, so much like the Wellness Center is a general corporate purpose. So our statutory ability to fund a project like that, absent a referendum, would be limited, capped to $700,000. So anything we would do beyond that would require a public referendum. So more than likely, we're looking at something along that line. So we did kind of talk when we met with Christie, just kind of loosely about a timeline that depends on how things go. But we would look at potentially, this could be, we wouldn't want to rule it out, but could be an opportunity for this fall. We have a general city election this fall. And so if we want a ballot initiative on the general city election ballot, we would have to notify the county auditor by September 16th. So whether or not we'll be in a position, obviously you would have to act on that as a council if we were ready for that to be put on a ballot in November. But we'll have to see how things go and how things progress. Maybe we'll be ready, maybe we won't. Impossible to know at this moment. So, but you know, that would kind of be what that time frame would look like. In terms of the visioning, conceptual design, budgeting, portion of the project, you'd see there the proposal is for $18,000. That's a lump sum fee. And again, like with the previous project, this initial phase is credited towards the overall design fee. So in this case, again, it depends on the scope of the proposal, but we'd be looking at a professional services contract somewhere in the range of between 7 and 9% for, you know, again, design, construction, observation, administration, bidding, all of those kinds of things, which is pretty well customary to what we see on most of our projects now. Special assessment projects are higher than that, but that's definitely within that scope. So that, again, is not a add-on to that 7 to 9%. That figure is within that range for the professional services contract. So, you know, so generally, I think if you looked at, like, what would this project be? So if we said it was going to be, I have no idea, but let's say it's a $3 million project. You know, if we were to negotiate a contract with Bergeron Cram at 8%, you know, it'd be $240,000 for a contract. So the visioning component of that is about 7.5%. So while it's certainly a small piece of that overall contract, as I said earlier, I think it's maybe the most important piece because it's the start. I guess I don't have anything further on that unless anybody has any questions.
Council, any questions for Scott? Thank you.
Question.
Yep.
Decides to go with this agreement tonight, this agreement binding all the way through construction?
No, we would have to negotiate that. No, you're correct. So no, we would, basically this is for the first phase. If the project goes forward, then we would negotiate a second phase. So very similar like what we do with public works projects. We'll have a contract for the design and staking and stuff like that, then negotiate out the second phase.
Any other questions, Council? Thank you, Scott. Christie? Bergeron Cram, welcome again.
Hello again, thank you. So I appreciate the words of confidence from Scott. We are extremely excited and I think very energized to be part of this process. We had a couple initial conversations. It sounds like kind of an amazing opportunity for Clear Lake that we're very excited to be part of. And it is, as Scott was mentioning, very important, the upfront visioning part to make sure that, you know, every voice is heard, that all the needs are assessed, and then in the end we envision something or help envision something for the community that hits as many of those points as we possibly can, so that it is as flexible and accessible to as many people as possible. I think the you know, kind of initial steps would be talking to some of the groups, as we had discussed, the library groups, kind of pulling out some of those needs. then bringing kind of some of those needs put a little bit of framework to those, bring them to the wider community so that they have something to react to, and then just kind of keep that visioning process moving forward. Any questions for me? I think Scott covered it pretty well.
I have a question on the, just looking at the difference between the two fees.
Sure.
Is the second fee almost double just because of the visioning process, the time spent
Correct.
gathering all that information and the needs?
Right, so, yep, to reiterate that, the first kind of splash pad and park proposal assumes a little bit more straightforward process, kind of working with a committee and kind of, just knocking that project out. Whereas this, we want to be purposeful in including, we kind of talked about initially how many different people we'd fold in and the steps we would take to do that. So you're correct that it's a little bit of an expanded scope up front.
Christie, would you go on the back side of the sheet? Would you go through those steps
Sure, yes.
for us, please?
Yep,
Like starting with document. And
Yep, so in the number one visioning process, so we did talk about, we have access to a certain type of technology that we can actually do a whole building 3D scan of the existing Woodford building, and that can be accessed by anyone forever then. So that we talked about, that would be nice to have that documented no matter what happens to that building. And then once we get to know that, inside and out, that existing property, assessing whether there is anything within that property, whether it's small or large actual building components, or it's just kind of the background story or the legacy that we all know that we can bring forward into the new project. So that's an important first step, really just kind of getting the backgrounds is kind of how we say, let's get the backgrounds of what we have to work with here. And then when we start to work with some of maybe the smaller community groups, we would also bring to the table maybe some food for thought ideas that maybe haven't been thought about yet or proposed yet, just so we can throw those all into the mix with the ideas that are maybe already kind of percolating right now. We talk with the various community groups. We kind of put that all together into something that the community can react to, and we would envision a community forum. I guess I would throw out there, it's always best to have those kind of things in person, obviously, but we have in COVID times done some kind of virtual survey, interactive, real-time kind of voting type situations where we can involve people and get people engaged even if we're not in the same room. So we would just have to kind of assess where we're at that point, but we feel confident we can kind of do that either way. And then once we hear from everyone, we hear from the community and the groups, we'd really kind of boil all that down into what we call a program of spaces, so that we can really kind of get basically a list of what everyone is talking about, what we're all agreeing to that this facility would house. We would put a vision to that, meaning plans, kind of rendering, and again, a budget range. So everyone then at that kind of line in the sand there between 1 and 2 is everyone kind of can understand the scope that we're talking about to move forward on.
When you state meet with library and other community groups to assess the needs, how do you plan to do that? Walk through that.
Sure. So we would, as I'd mentioned kind of prior to that, we'd have all our backgrounds in place, right? So we'd have a kind of a layout of the site, a layout of kind of what we have to work with. And it's really kind of a interview type process. We're more listening at that point. We're understanding what have they thought about, what are some of the future programs that they need a facility to support. Just really kind of documenting all the thoughts, kind of pulling out, challenging maybe some thoughts, but also bringing to the table our experience with, what these future-focused community and library facilities are nowadays, really, right? It's more than stacks of books. That's important, but this facility, our understanding is that it's going to enhance the more traditional library that we already have. So it's really just understanding what is Clear Lake's particular authentic vision for this facility, kind of just drawing that out with these smaller groups.
So when you get into what you're calling visionary groups, then that could include a combination of library board and citizens? Or would you have separate library board and separate citizens and other groups? How would you do that?
Probably how we would envision it, and I think this is something we can talk about as we maybe get to know more about what these groups' particular already knowledge of and already vision is, but we would probably work with the specific groups first because they kind of maybe have their own ideas and just kind of be the keepers of all that, gatherers of all that knowledge. And then we would bring that to the wider community after we kind of dig out the particular knowledge of the groups like the library that maybe know more particular the needs for the facility. Then we'd bring it to the community for more support of those needs and additional ideas. But the goal is to include, you know, a wide variety.
And you would break these down into groups? I'm just interested in how you're going to.
Sure, yes.
You're not going to have a large group, but you'll have smaller groups?
Yes, it would likely be more productive if we can kind of have more intimate conversations with smaller groups, correct. But then the community-wide forum, that might be a larger kind of scenario, maybe breaking it into 2 larger groups depending on how much we would how many people we anticipate coming to something like that.
Mhm.
But the upfront community conversations would be smaller, more intimate conversations.
I know when we were doing the lakefront at one of those times, we had a proposal, and the people at that time who were running that, you know, actually called them charrettes or their
Sure.
focus groups,
Yep.
or, you know, they all have different names for them, but they gathered that information before they actually started the project.
Correct.
And for me, this project in itself would be, we're offering a service when this is all developed.
Mm-hmm.
That's just in my head. I don't know what others think. But that we'd be offering a service to our community. You know, these would be services that they would or able to take advantage of by having a facility like this.
Right.
Okay, that's just, I think that's different than what we've had before in proposals. Usually it's a building or it's a place or something that's going up, whereas this is totally different than what we've dealt with before.
Sure.
Than what I've dealt with before.
Yeah, so I think there's a component, if I'm hearing, of which we would agree in, assessing needs, assessing
Right.
what this facility can help house as far as programs. So there's a need assessment. There's also a kind of wider support assessment of the community. What's everyone going to get excited about? What can we maybe help push as what people don't envision as a library facility providing to the community, help educate them on that and help enlighten them on that.
And then you'd prioritize that as stated here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, and then if and when it comes time for that to go on a ballot, if and when, then you would develop all the materials for that and
Yep.
assist with the promotion of that, I would assume?
Yes, at that point, we're going to be as invested in it as any of you and wanting to see, you know, the messaging be concise and energized and correct. So, yep, we will be right along with you in that step, producing a rendering if, you know, likely that's what people can understand quickly, plans that helps them understand, layout, budget, but then certainly the messaging to the community.
Okay, so if this gets started like tomorrow, then we're looking at 9 months or so of preliminary work here before it ever comes to the citizens, if in fact it comes to the citizens.
For
Vote.
the vote, yes, yeah. But prior to that, we would definitely want them to be involved with
Correct.
the conversation. Yep.
Correct, yeah,
Yep.
very much so. Mhm. Any other questions, Councilor
Cri-
Christ?
Yeah, I got another
Go
one.
ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Has your office, I know you've done lots of different architectural designs and different things. Have you done anything similar to this?
Yeah, we're actually lots of civic and community work. Currently, right now, actually, we're working with the community of Forest City on, they actually purchased a old supermarket building and are converting it to their, what they're calling library. It's their public library, but it's really their public library and what their public library is going to be, right? It's a community space, it's genealogy space, it's a gathering space, coffee, conversations, kind of, everything we talked about, that interactive, knowledge-seeking community hub. So, and several other communities we worked with, just that evolution of what is a facility in the way that people used to think about it, and what is it going to be. And it sounds like, from our perspective, that's very much what Clear Lake wants to focus on. We have a library, we have an excellent library. How do we supplement that?
Any other questions for Christie?
Yes, according to your timeline here, if this is put on the November ballot and it passes, where do we go from there? Are we going into design and construction right away, or?
Yeah, we could, right? So that's what would kick off that process, correct? And then we would kind of enter into that, or not kind of, we would enter into that number 2 stage at that point. Once we know the scope, we know it's supported, we know it's funded, we can start with the more detailed design and construction documents.
This was supposed to be a project that was gonna be 5 to 10 years out.
Well, and I mean, that wouldn't be our decision necessarily when to activate that next process. That would be your decision. But that's why we break those out into the 2, so that there's a line for, does this go forward now?
Council, any other questions for Christie? Thanks, Christie.
Thank you.
All right, council, how about a discussion on this before I entertain a motion? Or would you rather I entertain a motion and we have the discussion start now? Okay. Anyone wish to start?
Sure, I have a few
go ahead.
comments, Mayor. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Christie for coming tonight. Appreciate you being here and going through this. Also, I appreciate Scott's review and explanation of the process. I think that's very helpful to the community. So thank you for that. I think this is a very exciting project for Clear Lake. I'm totally biased. I love our library. We've had a terrific library director for many decades with Jill Pankook, and then Gene Casey before that, and before that. So I'm a big fan, and I appreciate the opportunity that this council and mayor has taken to support our library. And I think, again, I want to support moving forward on this professional services agreement with Bergeron and Cram, and I agree with Scott's assessment of using an independent architectural firm to do that. I think that's in the public interest, and I think that will be very beneficial for this project. Our first step in this process really was to acquire the property from Tom and Jan Lovell. And I, again, want to agree with what's been said already, that I think we were very fortunate that they were enthusiastic about our vision for this property. And they've been very supportive the entire way. They've been longtime supporters of our library and our community. So I want to thank them specifically for their willingness to sell it to us. Frankly, as Scott mentioned before, at a value that I would suggest is far below its market potential, and that just reflects their generosity and public vision for this project. So much thanks to them. Now, I would also say I think it's important to point out that this next step we're taking with you tonight is part of a long process, and it will require substantial input from the public, many different groups that I would like to hear from, including the chamber, the library groups that I'm a part of, the foundation, the Friends of the Library, and the trustees of the library, and many, many others I think will be very important. So as it's pointed out in the proposal, it'll take 6 to 7 months to kind of visualize this and plan the project in order to have it on the ballot in November. So a lot to do in that time frame, and of course Hopefully we'd be ready by then, and if not, we can make that decision at the time. So finally, I think it's an opportune time to move forward with this project, given the low interest rate environment that we find ourselves in. Our opportunities to borrow at such extremely low rates are going to be very transitory. It presents us with a unique opportunity, and as Scott mentioned earlier in his terrific budget presentation, we have incredibly low levels of debt. And I appreciate that, and I've supported that kind of budgeting in the past, but it creates a tremendous opportunity and flexibility for us going forward for projects like this. So I think it'll be a great project for our community, and I want to thank everyone for their time. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Yeah, Your Honor.
Mike?
First of all, I enjoyed the presentation. It's got a lot of wonderful ideas. I guess what I'm going to speak to here is more procedural than anything else. We don't actually we haven't even taken possession of the property yet. I've been involved in both long and short-term planning for the city for 14 years now. And this process usually involves a lot of detailed discussions and sometimes setting aside funding. To my recollection, and I might be all wet here, but the mind isn't quite what it used to be, but there's never been any request or subsequent discussion of a need for a library expansion or a community center. I mean, it's not been on our radar. And we talk about a lot of things at our planning sessions. We've done scores of projects for many city needs and usually had months of discussion before we reach the step of a professional services agreement. And as Gary brought up, my understanding from a previous meeting was the big sense of urgency was to acquire the property when the offer was made, you know, and that was critical because that wasn't going to be on the table very long. But pretty much the consensus in that meeting was, well, we don't really need any library expansion right now. But 5 to 10 years down the road, who knows what a 21st century library will look at. And I agreed to that. I'm not at all opposed to the concept here. In fact, if this had hit our desk a year from now, I'd have been all on board. But I just can't see the urgency to get all of this planning done in such a big hurry, especially in the current, you know, Bennett makes a good point, the financial aspects, but we're dealing with a variety of things right now that have a lot of ambiguity in terms of what we're going to have to contribute, moving those forward, like the wellness center, et cetera. So, you know, right now, I just feel we're kind of rushing into this and maybe getting the cart a little ahead of the horse.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone else?
Yeah, if I could just speak to that a little bit, Mayor. I appreciate Mike's comments, and I guess just my vision for what we're doing with the professional services agreement in this next few months would allow us to develop some ideas that we then don't have to move forward on if we're not comfortable with. And I don't know if that would alleviate some of the timing issues you're concerned with, Mike. But in terms of engaging the process and just developing some concepts and ideas, I guess that's what we're kind of supporting here now. But I do appreciate your comments, and I just think you know, at that point, later on in the process, we can make certain determinations whether to support a project or not. But thank you.
Any other council people?
I think everybody sitting up here, the concept of the library extension is on our minds. We're all for it. I think the timing's a little bad right now. We have a lot on our plate coming up in the next few years. And I agree with Mike. The cart's got ahead of the horse here. In fact, the horse is way out in the pasture right now, as far as I'm concerned. We don't even own the property. I think we're moving a little too fast here. To be honest with you. Those are my thoughts.
You good, Gary?
Thanks, Gary.
I do have a couple of thoughts. For me, I do agree that it feels like it's hurrying up and getting it bought and trying to do something pretty quick with the building. But I think in essence too, time isn't of the essence where we have to accomplish it all in a year. I think when it takes 6 or 7 months for it to play out, it'll turn into 9 and 10 and maybe a year and a month, and it's going to take some time. Part of me is excited about the concept of just creating the vision for that parcel of land because of all the great things that happen at the library. When we have the budget meetings and they come and tell us all the great things that are happening at the library and the numbers of books and all the movies that are rented out. We live in a community that turns into the Arctic for several months over the winter. And I just am excited to see the potential for what that can bring to the community in the future. And I personally don't think it will be a year or two until something's actually done there, because things just don't happen overnight in this business. I would want it to as a real estate investor. I'd want to move quicker. But we all know realistically it doesn't necessarily happen on a city level. So again, that's just my thoughts. I sort of feel like the kid in the room just trying to visualize all the fun things that could happen there, and the idea of a coffee shop and somewhere people could go and congregate and talk, and maybe just like sort of like a Starbucks and get on FaceTime or something and talk to grandma and on the East Coast, or who knows, you know, the things are endless. And maybe some of those things are being done in the library now, but the vision for this, I think, is something 21st century, like Scott says, that it will be something new and fresh and neat, and you can get out of the weather and go in and have a little area in the corner where you can do your thing. And I don't know exactly what that looks like, but it's an opportunity that does seem like it came on pretty quick, because just a few months ago we were considering purchasing it, and now to actually talk about what's it going to look like and when's it going to be done just seems like it's happening, you know, pretty quickly. But I think overall, to start this process is no harm done in that, and it's never cheap to get an architect to do the work to create the rendering and all that for us, but at the same time, with the time frame that we're talking about, I think it's not necessarily a bad time to get started. So
Thanks, Dana. Mark, anything?
I would kind of echo Dana's statements. I am not a creative person, but you know, I think it sets the stage for something down the road that we can all be proud of, and having as much public input as possible is beneficial. So
Thanks, Mark. Throwing my 2 cents here. A lot of unknowns here. But that, in fact, is why we're doing this, is to find out what these unknowns are. What are the needs of our citizens? That's who we're doing this for. All of the citizens. Cuts across all ages. And I think that's the neat part. That's what we're going to do, the visionary process for and of. What's the educational needs, perhaps, of something like this? Is there any need out there? What about the social services needs? Not just for young people, but I have to say now, those who are middle age and those of us who are beyond middle age. You know, how is that going to be something that will fit their needs? And I think that's critical. But in order to do that, you know, we've got to go through this process. I don't think Well, take Mike's point. We've got a heck of a lot going on right now. We really do. So take Bennett's statement. If there ever was a financial time to do it, now's the time. I don't know if we'll ever get down to the 0.33 that we had on those, GOBs there that we had out recently. But, this is a town that is steadily moving forward. All good towns are caring, understanding people, want to be profitable. And, I feel we're in that category. We are moving ahead real quick. Courtyard Plaza, One Vision Housing, potential development of the area west of North 20th, Wellness Center, 36 new homes this year. I guess it's a record. Splash pad area. We're going to try to renovate the icon known as the seawall, and that will be coming up shortly for us. Thank goodness that that's taking place. We've got new housing areas going up over town. We just saw another new one this evening that might be a possibility. The downtown, I just heard by rumor that there may be some new owners of property down there. Some new businesses going in. One is going out, a new one is going in right away. I've never seen Main Street, if this happens, all filled up like that. Both ends, you might say, both blocks. That's going to be absolutely wonderful. And all retail, it's my understanding. Look at the activities that the Chamber's got going on. This is a hustling, booming little town. And I believe that this is another part of that. That's my expectation. How can we serve all the citizens? And this is one of those areas. I know we serve the citizens with our ambulance project. We aren't there to make money with that. I know we're serving our citizens with that pool, the aquatic center. I don't know that that'll ever be, truly profitable, but it's a service we offer to them. There may be many, not only educational, but some behavioral needs that we haven't ever served in this community, or how many places have. I just see the town of Clive as opening up a behavioral type center. What that is, I have no idea, but I would be anxious to look at that. Once again, if this goes through, I would hope that Bergeron and Cram would really look at the why, the what, the where, the when, the who, and the how. This is a part of the visioning process. And when that all comes to fruition, then it comes back here, and as Gary said, now we need to look at, well, really, what is the building process of all this? Do we take it to vote? Do we not take it to vote? How else do we do it? I think it's a really, really good project. I think what Christie and Andy and Bergeron and Cram have put together here is very concise. Thank goodness it's not a bunch of words in there, but it tells, and it's in steps all the way down through as to how they are going to do their part of it. Thank you for your time. All right.
Mayor, excuse me.
Yes.
Could I ask Scott one question before we move on? Is that okay? Scott, could you fill us in on the view of the owners of the property in terms of the schedule on this project, or what is their view of how we should approach this? Do they have one?
Try to be succinct, sooner rather than later.
Thank you.
So the schedule that we talked about, they're aware of and support.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, council, I'll entertain a motion to approve the professional services agreement proposal with Bergeron and Cram for the 4th Street Library Building Expansion Project. I'm going to do roll call when we do this, okay?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Bennett, seconded by Dana, that we approve the professional services agreement proposal with Bergeron and Cram for the 4th Street library building expansion. Roll call. Mark?
Yes.
Mike?
No.
Dana?
Yes.
Bennett?
Yes.
Gary?
No.
Motion carries 3-2, and we'll move forward with that. Thank you, council. Appreciate your input here as well. And thank you, Christie, for your time tonight. Chief, report. No report, John. No report. Council, any questions for Chief?
Best report we've had all year.
Short and sweet.
Public Works, Jeremy's absent, isn't he? Under Mayor's report, this past weekend, I don't know if any of you had the opportunity, but there was an impromptu kite festival. I believe Larry Day had something to do with that, but that was really kind of a neat thing, at least that as I drove by once or twice, right out in front of Mr. Eveling's place there as well. I also want to, I know we've talked about this here before, but I do believe officially the surf got their designated letter from the Department of the Interior that they are now an official national landmark. And we certainly thank, first of all, the Snyder family for taking hold of that many years ago now, and also our non-profit group that runs that with Mr. Nicholas and Mr. Cooney and Mr. Stevenson and surf manager Lori Leeds. Congratulations on that. And we certainly wish our girls who play the game at 9 o'clock, I believe, tonight against Waukon. Tune in 1490 when you get home to hear Mr. Fisher on there. That's a key game for them in the state tournament. And the boys tomorrow night play Humboldt over at Algona. Is that right, Mr. Ritter? What time is that? 7 o'clock, and Mr. Fisher will be on the radio, I believe, with that game there too. Stacy, are you online?
She had to drop off.
Stacy dropped off. We have Chad, no? We are done. Okay. Mr. Flory? Any questions for? Okay, thank you. Any other business, council?